The moon hung low over Graceland, its pale light slipping through lace curtains into the great room where Elvis Presley stood, shoulders heavy with the day's last chord and the night's looming concert. His dark suit hung forgotten on the chair. In his worn slippers, he felt every lingering ache of voice and soul. The hall clock ticked past midnight, but the house was not silent. At the foot of the grand staircase, 5-year-old Lisa Marie waited, her small frame wrapped in a quilt, eyes bright as starlight. When he paused at the threshold, she looked up without a word, alone in her worry, wise beyond her years. Her hand reached for his, and in that trembling grip, Elvis felt the sum of all his doubts. Was his music enough? Was his heart still true? Tonight, under blazing spotlights and roaring crowds, he would sing again. But first, he needed to listen to the single urgent melody echoing in that silent room. A child's unspoken plea for her father's faith and strength. In that moment, King of rock and roll and simple man became one, and the world he would awaken tomorrow began here, in the hush between a daughter's hope and her father's quiet resolve. Elvis Presley trudged through the front door of Graceland long after midnight, the weight of another day's work pressing on his shoulders like a thick coat. The mansion was hushed, lit only by the soft glow of lamps in the entryway and the distant reflection of moonlight on the polished floors. He slipped out of his stage jacket, still warm from the evening's recording session, and draped it over a nearby chair. His shirt felt damp with nervous sweat, and his boots carried the dust of so many airports and stages. Above him, the great portrait of his mother watched from the landing. His gaze lifted to Gladys's gentle face, and for an instant he felt a child's tremor of fear and longing. He found his way down the hallway and into the living room, where a single lamp was on, casting long shadows over plush chairs and a baby grand piano. On the rug by the hearth sat Lisa Marie, her small back to him, knees drawn to her chest. Next to her lay a well-loved doll, its porcelain face cracked in several places. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. He paused, unsure whether to call out or remain still. The pitch of her breathing sounded fragile, as though it would falter if he disturbed it. She wore a nightdress embroidered with tiny stars, the same one Priscilla had insisted she wear to keep warm on these cool nights. "Eliza?" he murmured, voice rough from exhaustion. No answer. He stepped closer, careful not to startle her. She turned, cheeks wet with tears, eyes rimmed red. In her 5-year-old face lived a wisdom he both ached for and feared, an innocence that could see into corners he desperately wanted to keep hidden. "Daddy." Her voice cracked like thin glass. His heart clenched. He crouched beside her, gathering her small form into his arms. She fit against him, as though she belonged there, trusting him to hold the world together. He pressed his cheek to the top of her damp hair. "Jesus hears everything, sweetheart," she whispered, voice trembling. "Even the things you don't say." He closed his eyes. The quiet of Graceland pressed in on him, the silence louder than any applause. He wanted to speak. Words of reassurance, of faith, of unshakable certainty. But they would ring hollow. Instead, he held her tighter, rocking slowly on the big chair's edge. Lisa Marie sniffled and pulled back just enough to look at him. "When you sing, Daddy, do you think he's listening?" Elvis swallowed, the lump in his throat closing around his voice. He wanted to promise her the universe, but truth weighed him down. "I'm not sure I believe it myself." Before he could answer, the clock on the mantel chimed 3 times. The moment broke, and he gently kissed her forehead. I think he's always listening, honey," he said finally, voice rough and soft at once. "He's listening to you." She nodded, wiping her eyes on the sleeve of his shirt. Together, they sat in silence until her breathing steadied. The world beyond Graceland's walls could wait. In that quiet room, he was merely a father, and she merely a child seeking comfort. By dawn, the hush gave way to urgency. In a few hours, he would appear on Sunrise Blessings, a regional telecast supporting underfunded community churches. He had promised to sing there, just 3 songs, simple hymns his mother had taught him. He'd arrived without Priscilla and Lisa Marie before, but this time her small heart had clung to him, and he'd known he could not face the day without her presence. When Priscilla found Lisa Marie tucked into his armchair, blanket draped over her feet, she raised an eyebrow. "You're bringing her on set?" He patted his daughter's back. "She asked to pray for me. I can't say no." Her eyes softened. "Just watch out for her heart. The cameras will crowd in." He nodded, pulling on his boots. In that moment, the king of rock and roll felt no crown upon his head, only the heavy mantle of being someone's father, called to protect a child's faith when his own had wavered. He left Graceland hand in hand with Lisa Marie, the great oak doors closing softly behind them. The sun had not yet risen, but already the world was stirring awake, and soon so would he, to step into lights and lenses that could never capture the fragile miracle waiting in a 5-year-old's simple question. Tomorrow, the stage would demand a star. Tonight, the silence demanded a man. By mid-morning, the modest rehearsal studio of Sunrise Blessings had transformed from a sleepy set into a hive of controlled frenzy. Technicians scurried beneath makeshift risers, adjusting cables. Camera operators tested angles on the small stage, and production assistants carried trays of lukewarm coffee and stale donuts down narrow corridors. The pall of caffeine and anticipation clung to the air. Elvis Presley arrived just as the midday light slanted through frosted windows. He wore a charcoal gray suit, modest, unadorned, and a pale gold tie that caught the light when he moved. Priscilla stood close by his side, smoothing Lisa Marie's crisp white blouse. The little girl clutched her beloved doll, clutching its plastic limbs as though in prayer. A few crew members recognized him and bowed their heads discreetly. Others whispered fervent hushes, smoothing hair or adjusting lighting stands to catch his profile just so. In the makeup trailer, Elvis allowed a single artist to touch up his temples. He glanced into the mirror, eyes crimson-rimmed but resolute. No stroke of powder could hide the exhaustion or the vulnerability that rippled beneath his calm exterior. "Daddy," Lisa Marie said quietly as she stepped onto the set, "do you think Jesus knows I'm here?" He knelt and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "He knows, my love," he said softly. "And I know you're brave." Her nod was hesitant, the world of bright lights and buzzing cameras possibly as intimidating to her as it was surreal to him. On cue, the studio doors opened, and the host, Reverend James Carter, tall, gentle-eyed, wearing simple clerical robes, beckoned from the stage. "Elvis, Lisa Marie, right this way," he said, voice echoing richness that came from years behind a pulpit. They stepped onto the set, a shallow dais adorned with a single wooden cross and an array of fresh white lilies. 2 cameras rolled and stage lights flared. The audience, some 50 seats worth of invited local families, veterans, and community leaders, sat buzzingly, leaning forward in folding chairs. A band of 3 musicians quietly tuned their instruments in the corner, but paused when Elvis and his daughter took the stage. Reverend Carter raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of our greatest voices, Mr. Elvis Presley, and his daughter, Lisa Marie." Applause swelled, polite at first, then genuine as the little girl waved, her cheeks coloring. A camera operator stepped closer to frame her shy smile. Elvis guided her to the microphone stand. He knelt to her level, whispering, "You just speak from your heart." She inhaled deeply, clutching the doll. Her eyes scanned the audience, though most faces blurred into bright lights and shadowed silhouettes. "I want to tell everyone," she began, voice small at first, wavering like a candle flame in a breeze. "My daddy always says Jesus listens when we're scared or sad." She paused, searching for strength in her father's quiet presence at her side. "And when I feel alone, I whisper to him at night, and I know he hears me." The room fell into a hush so complete that the distant hum of ventilation fans seemed intrusive. Reverend Carter's lips parted in a silent "Amen." Even the musicians held their breath, hands poised on strings and keys, unable to destrum their miracle of restraint. From the wings, Priscilla blinked back tears, clutching her husband's arm. Journalists froze, pens suspended over notebooks, cameras rolling but capturing only the hush. Encouraged, Lisa Marie continued. She wrapped her small hand around the microphone's base. "Sometimes Daddy gets tired, and he wonders if his songs matter. But when I say my prayers for him, I know Jesus is listening, and I know my daddy's voice matters too." Elvis's throat tightened. His hand rose to his mouth. He stifled a sob by pressing his palm over his lips. The swirling lights seemed to dim around him, focusing solely on the child whose faith had given him new purpose. Reverend Carter stepped forward, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Thank you, precious one. That was beautiful." He smiled broadly, tears glossing his eyes. "You've reminded us that we are heard, and that even the strongest can falter without the comfort of faith." Suddenly, the band began playing softly in the background, an instrumental hymn, familiar and haunting. Their notes filled the space with tenderness, carrying Lisa Marie's words on wings of melody. The audience rose slowly to its feet, a standing ovation that seemed more like a benediction than applause. Elvis straightened, his eyes glistening. He placed a father's arm around her shoulder and guided her gently back from the microphone. The cameras lingered on his face, raw, unguarded, a portrait of a man whose heart had been reshaped by a child's simple truth. As the host transitioned to introduce Elvis's song, the king of rock and roll turned to his daughter, voice hushed but steady. "That was perfect, honey." She nodded shyly and tucked behind his leg. He lifted her into his arms, kissing her forehead. Then, holding her close, he stepped forward to meet the microphone once more. The band shifted seamlessly into the opening chords of "Peace in the Valley." But Elvis's voice did not soar into showmanship. Instead, it carried the weight of gratitude and renewal. Each line offering solace, each phrase a pledge renewed under the light of his child's faith. When the last note faded, the studio remained still, breaths suspended in veneration. For that fleeting moment, televisions across several states broadcast not a star's performance, but a father's redemption. Backstage, lights flickered, and crew members exchanged stunned looks. Producers whispered about ratings and social impact, but none dared break the reverent hush. Elvis collected his daughter in his arms once more, murmuring, "You did it, angel." Lisa Marie rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. In that close, secret embrace, father and daughter shared a sacred peace, a quiet triumph that transcended stage, spotlight, and spectacle, anchored instead in a child's unwavering faith and a father's humbling gratitude. The spotlight's warmth still lingered on Elvis Presley's skin as he and Lisa Marie stepped out of the studio's side exit into the humid Memphis midnight. A gray Cadillac stretched behind them, engine rumbling softly, a quiet vessel for their unscripted journey. The hush of deserted city streets enveloped them, punctuated only by distant neon signs flickering and the hum of cicadas. Lisa Marie, lulled by adrenaline and relief, had fallen asleep against her father's broad shoulder. Her doll rested on his lap, face tilted toward the moonlight. Elvis glanced at her in the rearview mirror, chest tightening with protectiveness. Tonight she had shared more truth than many adults ever dared. He navigated once through familiar avenues, then exited onto a narrower lane where the streetlights thinned. Ahead loomed the white pillars of First Covenant Church, its facade dark except for the glow of a single lamp over the front door. He turned the Cadillac toward it without hesitation, following a compulsion he barely understood. They drove into a small courtyard ringed by ancient oaks. The crunch of gravel under tires was startling in the silence. Elvis cut the engine and remained seated for a moment, listening to the night's stillness. He reached over and lifted his daughter gently into his arms, careful not to wake her fully. Her breath came slow and even. Stepping onto the porch, he held the heavy wooden door open and carried Lisa Marie inside. The interior was vast and cavernous in the absence of daily activity. Rows of polished pews stretched before a simple altar, above which hung a crucifix illuminated by the moonlight through stained glass windows. The scent of old wood and wax candles filled the air. Elvis set his daughter down on a front-row pew. She stirred, blinking up at him. "Daddy?" she murmured, voice thick with sleep. He knelt beside her. "I needed to come here," he said softly. "To pray. Will you pray with me?" She sniffled and nodded. He guided her small hands to fold in front of her. Then, for a moment, silence reigned. Two figures side by side in the hush, unguarded. Elvis closed his eyes and bowed his head. The grandeur of fame, the roar of crowds, the glare of camera lights, all of it receded into irrelevance. Here, in this sacred quiet, he was not a king. He was merely a man seeking solace. His chest constricted as he felt the weight of years of unspoken anxieties, fear of failing as a father, doubts about his spiritual purpose, guilt for every night spent away from home. He exhaled slowly. "Lord," he began in a voice that trembled, "I don't always know the right path. I sing for thousands, but sometimes I forget to sing to you. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay." He paused, uncertain. Lisa Marie, perched on the wooden seat beside him, closed her eyes and whispered a small "Amen." Her faith, so pure and unwavering, buoyed him. He felt tears spring and roll down his cheeks. "I need strength," he continued, "strength to be her daddy, to be who you made me to be, not just a performer. Will you help me?" His confession cracked open the quiet space, the honesty echoing against rafters that had heard generations of pleas. He felt as though every corner of his life lay bare, every hidden wound exposed for healing. Lisa Marie peeked at him, offering a shy, supportive smile. He reached across the pew and squeezed her hand, the simple contact grounding him. After a time, he rose, gently lifting his daughter. They moved toward the altar. Elvis knelt alone beneath the cross, placing both hands palm down on the smooth wooden kneeler. He looked up at the crucifix, Jesus' arms outstretched in silent invitation. In the stillness, he whispered names of loved ones lost, of nights spent in temptation, of dreams he feared were empty. The moon filtered through colored glass, tinting his bowed head in soft hues of blue and crimson. When he emerged from his kneeling, Lisa Marie strode to his side. "I'm proud of you, Daddy," she said, small voice resolute. I know Jesus hears everything. He swallowed, nodding. Thank you, baby girl, he murmured, for reminding me. They retraced their steps through the quiet sanctuary, exiting into the cool air. Elvis cradled her once more and returned to the Cadillac. As he started the engine, a flicker of peace settled over him, an unfamiliar calm that promised the promise of renewal. Back at Graceland, Priscilla waited on the porch, concern etched on her face. She opened the door as he lifted Lisa Marie into her arms. Without a word, she embraced both her husband and their daughter, a silent acknowledgement of the night's gravity. Inside, Elvis carried Lisa Marie to her bed, tucking her beneath star-patterned sheets. She stirred, offering a soft, drowsy smile. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'm here, Angel." Always. As he slipped from the room, he paused at the threshold. The hall lights cast long shadows. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and allowed himself a fleeting prayer. This time, not for an audience, but for genuine guidance. Alone in his study, he removed his belt and loosened his tie. He sat behind his desk, dim lamp flickering, and opened a small leather-bound journal he rarely touched. With a pen in hand, he wrote, "Tonight, I was a father before a king. In prayer, I found the truth I'd lost in the glare of the stage. Let every song I sing now come from this place of honesty." He paused, setting the pen aside. The hush of midnight wrapped around him once more, but now it felt protective, like the memory of a child's unwavering faith. In that quiet, he sensed something had shifted, an ember of genuine hope, ready to burn brightest in the days ahead. In the days following that midnight confession at First Covenant Church, Elvis Presley's world seemed to expand with echoes of unseen lives. The televised segment of Sunrise Blessings, with Lisa Marie's childlike testimony and his own gentle hymn, had aired only in 4 southern states, but the ripple it created reached far beyond television ratings. At Graceland's mailroom, a stack of envelopes grew daily, each stamped from corners of the nation, small-town postmarks from Georgia, airmail envelopes from California, even a battered envelope marked VA, Hospital Number 12. Most letters carried the same refrain: gratitude for a moment of shared humanity, hope restored by a child's faith. Some writers spoke of personal desperation, single mothers struggling to feed their children, men battered by addiction, teenagers feeling lost in a world that valued fame over kindness. Among the dozens of handwritten notes, one arrived in a simple white envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, edges frayed, the handwriting neat but firm. "Dear Mr. Presley, I was there that morning on Sunrise Blessings. I'm a vet from Nam, and I've seen too much to ever believe in niceties again. Yesterday, I planned to end it. After the show, after your little girl's words, I stepped outside and couldn't. I realized for the first time in years that someone still cared. I don't know you, sir, but through her, through you, I heard him. Thank you for that. John Jack Mercer, U.S. Army." 1969. Elvis folded the letter deliberately, fingers tracing the veteran's signature. That night, he carried it like a talisman into bed, its weight comforting. In his weary mind, he replayed Lisa Marie's words and Jack Mercer's confession, feeling an urgent responsibility awaken in his chest. 2 weeks later, Elvis rose before dawn and slipped from Graceland in a low-slung black Cadillac, the letter from Jack folded in his suit jacket pocket. The morning air was cool against his face as he drove past the old cotton warehouses, past rows of shuttered stores opening to the sun's quiet promise. He steered toward Veterans Memorial Hospital, where Jack Mercer was said to be receiving care for frostbite injuries and lingering trauma. Inside the hospital's hushed corridors, Elvis navigated by memory, past framed photographs of local heroes, past a nurse's station where a tired attendant looked up in startled recognition. When he reached Ward C, room 18, he knocked gently and entered. Jack Mercer lay in a narrow bed, eyes closed. Tubes and monitors bristled around him, but his face was calm, as if he'd found a momentary peace in slumber. Elvis approached quietly, voice barely a whisper. "Jack?" The veteran's eyes fluttered open. Disbelief and exhaustion mingled on his face. "Mr. Presley?" His voice cracked, raspy from disuse. Elvis pulled a chair to the bedside. "May I sit?" Jack nodded. The pause that followed held years of unspoken struggle. Then Elvis placed the letter on Jack's bedside table. "I wanted to meet the man who wrote this." Jack's gaze shifted to the folded paper. He swallowed, fingers trembling as he reached for it. Tears gathered in his eyes. I didn't expect a reply." Elvis inclined his head. "Your words changed me too." He paused, gathering courage to speak from his heart. "I realized that faith isn't just a song to sing on stage. It's something we must live. You reminded me of that." Jack grasped Elvis's hand, thin, papered skin clinging to bone. "I don't deserve your thanks," he whispered, voice thick. "I thought I was done." "You deserve a chance," Elvis said softly. "I want to help. Whatever you need, therapy, a place to stay, work, I'll see it's done." Jack's lips trembled with a half-smile. "Then you are real." Elvis leaned forward. "I'm as real as they come, and I believe you are too." Back at Graceland, Elvis didn't speak of this visit. He only slipped Jack's letter into a framed shadow box on his bedroom wall. Lisa Marie's small typed transcript on top, Jack's note below, and a pressed lily from the church at the center, an emblem of rebirth. Months passed, and word filtered back. Jack Mercer had relocated to Memphis permanently. Through Presley-funded support, he began volunteering at the VA, hosting group therapy sessions for vets wrestling with depression. His own recovery, he later confided, was fueled by a single moment of kindness from a man he had only glimpsed on TV and by a child's unwavering faith in both her father and her savior. At home, Elvis watched Lisa Marie growing by heart and mind. She had sown a seed that took root in two very real souls, her father and a broken veteran. He thought of how fame had nearly swallowed him, and how a daughter's innocent question had set him free. On the anniversary of that fateful broadcast, Elvis invited Jack and several other veterans to Graceland's newly converted community hall, once a stables, now a place of music, fellowship, and free counseling. Under soft floodlights, Jack shared his story with a new audience, standing beside Elvis and Lisa Marie. Their shared gaze spoke of gratitude deeper than any medal or applause. Elvis closed the evening by strumming softly on his guitar, playing not for a stadium, but for a circle of survivors who had rediscovered hope. Lisa Marie hummed beside him, voice pure as dawn. As the last note faded, Elvis laid his instrument aside and locked eyes with his daughter. She gave him a small nod, an unspoken reassurance that this was exactly where he belonged. Under the dim glow of lanterns, nobody cheered. They simply sat together in stillness, hearts full, honoring the unspoken truth that sometimes the most profound stage is a quiet room where faith, compassion, and human connection converge. And there, in that hushed fellowship, the king found the greatest encore of all. Lives rekindled not by spectacle, but by a child's whisper and a father's promise kept in silence.